welcome next to Dr. Vanessa Borowski, who will be presenting findings from the project on the role of truth-telling in Australian reconciliation, addressing a colonial legacy.
That was quite a hard act to follow. I was green with envy about all those translation activities you've engaged in. And I suppose I feel like our project is really at kind of a very early stage in comparison. We basically launched the report in September, and we had all those public events, but I think there's another year's work in actually translating it into material that will be able to be used as creatively as you've engaged with your research. So I'll just talk a little bit about what we've done. Oh dear. Okay. It's a bit disconcerting. I mean, just to say, I'm sorry, I did these slides in a rush, and I didn't adhere to the instruction to do one slide. So this is the first slide, and what I realized is I put Vanessa Borowski there, and it really was a collaborative project. So when I say Vanessa Borowski there, I'm saying it's Vanessa Borowski talking here today about the project, not that I was the only stakeholder involved. And it did involve a very close collaboration with Reconciliation Australia, which I didn't want to get into when Sharam first asked that question, but I think I learned a lot through that process, and also the complexities of working with partners, and often, you know, our research objectives didn't necessarily align with that of an under-resourced NGO. So, you know, we would agree on things, and then Reconciliation Australia wouldn't actually be able to deliver on them in the end, which would be very disappointing for me personally. And, you know, so one has to, it took a lot of kind of self-reflexivity and nurturing of relationships in quite difficult and contested and, you know, frustrating contexts. So just to say that, but in the end we got there, and I think we, you know, hopefully have made a valuable contribution. So, I mean, just to start off, the initial conceptualization of the project was very much around reconciliation, but I suppose my thinking has shifted more and more towards the whole question of reckoning with the past and a more substantive engagement with the past, as opposed to the kind of reconciliation that I think was promoted by Howard in the 1990s, which was basically imposed on people without acknowledging the violations of the past. So in 2020, Tila Reid posed this question, which I thought was, which in some ways shaped our research, asking whether Australia is ready to gari yala, which means speak truth, and reckon with its past. So that's what our study tried to grapple with by investigating local truth-telling initiatives. And I think another positive thing that I came out of our engagement with Reconciliation Australia was their understanding of the enormous amount of work that was being done at a community level. So when I first approached them, I actually didn't have any sense of that kind of work. And they were very adamant that that is where the focus of the research needed to be. And I think they were absolutely right, and was a very important kind of recalibration of the way in which we did our research. So what the research demonstrated was the incredible perseverance of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities in undertaking truth-telling, often with limited and sometimes no resources and support. The study documented 25 community truth-telling initiatives. This is just a quick shot of a couple of those initiatives that we focused on, including 10 in-depth case studies, where we did interviews with community organisers, which shed light on the extraordinary, rich and diverse grassroots engagement with the truths of colonial history, including more recent violations such as the stolen generation. So this included activities such as repatriation, renaming, commemoration events, public artwork, and healing sites. Over time, I think these initiatives have allowed for more comprehensive understanding of historical violations, and as well as the significant contribution of First Nation people throughout Australia. So over time, the research found that the impact of this community truth-telling has been substantial, contributing over time to a re-evaluation of Australia's colonial history and the recognition of the violence it entailed. So while a lot of these initiatives were very small scale, people have plodded on with this activity all across the country, literally hundreds of small initiatives, decade after decade. And I think collectively, over time, they have shifted the national discourse about, Australia's founding. And as well, what we also found is that non-Indigenous communities have increasingly participated in these memorial and commemoration events, which has helped develop a deeper shared understanding of the past. As a result, more and more non-Indigenous Australians are becoming critical partners in truth-telling. I think often they do still struggle to know how to participate in truth-telling and what their role is as partners, but more and more non-Indigenous Australians are actually seriously engaging with their role in truth-telling. So I think these case studies provide models for truth-telling as a shared social responsibility that can enrich all Australians. However, I think the research also shows that there's still much work to do. Many important historical events and First Nations achievements remain substantially unrecognised. Sustained funding support and the recognition of historical events such as the stolen generations and frontier conflicts through formal commemorative events and dedicated museum sites, I think, are still crucial. There are a lot of absolutely remarkable non-governmental organisations supporting survivors of the stolen generation on an absolute shoestring, and it really is, I think, a travesty that those organisations are not being properly funded. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have long called for a comprehensive account of Australia's history and have emphasised the importance of truth-telling for political transformation and reconciliation. And I think the controversies around the voice and the ultimate result of the referendum are an object lesson on the importance of truth-telling and the truth-telling that still needs to happen in this country for people to understand both what happened and what kind of change still needs to happen in order for us to have a genuinely equitable and just society. So I think the research in many ways, I hope, provides some important lessons for how the vision of truth-telling that was articulated in the Uluru Statement could be realised and supported in the future in order to facilitate lasting transformation. The case studies provided examples of community truth-telling activities, the way in which these could be practiced in a manner that recognized people's self-determination, that implemented best practice and ensured safety and protection from re-traumatizing. I think that's often been a problem in truth-telling activities in the past and internationally, is that those who've been victimized are expected to do an enormous amount of work constantly retelling their stories of trauma and reliving that trauma. So I think it's critically important to be designing processes that are not re-traumatizing the people who were the victims. So I think also a very important emphasis was that truth-telling and acknowledgement of the past are seen as crucial steps towards reconciliation. We cannot have reconciliation without genuine recognition of these violations, and also that reconciliation requires forging of new relationships. I think there's an assumption that in the past there was some mythical, space where people were, living in harmony, and now we just need to come back together again. But it's actually a far more fundamental process of building relationships from the ground up. Those relationships don't exist. And I mean, as Noel Pearson said in his Boyer lecture, most non-Indigenous people have never met an Indigenous person or don't know that they have. So they're literally not in their sort of circle of empathy. And I think another very important kind of lesson coming out of the research was the importance of truth-telling as not only about acknowledging violation, but also as a powerful reassertion of Indigenous identity and self-determination, to countering attempts to erase the presence of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from Australian history and its landscape. It seeks to highlight the crucial roles and contributions of First Nations people in shaping Australia, whether through resistance against colonialism, acts of bravery and sacrifice, or their significant contribution to local communities and economies. So it's not only about entrenching a narrative of victimhood, it's about recognizing violations, but also reasserting strength and self-determination. Another very important finding was the importance of embedding truth processes in local place on country, rather than kind of more didactic processes of truth-telling. These experiential truth-telling, we found this kind of experiential truth-telling was very powerful, where learning occurs through immersive experiences on country rather than simply teaching people about facts. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultural practices such as smoking ceremonies, walking on country, storytelling and personal engagement with survivors contribute to healing dialogue and a deeper understanding of historical violations. In terms of local government, there are some local government role players that have played an amazing role in supporting truth-telling, but there's an enormous amount that still needs to be done at a local government level. Also, I think what would be important is more national recognition. Things like Mabo Day came up as an important national milestone that should be recognised by all Australians as an important recognition that Australia wasn't terra nullius when the colonists arrived, and just simply acknowledging that important fact is very important. So I think as Australia embarks on more formal truth-telling processes, the research that we've done on community truth-telling is very important, and it underlines the importance of providing resources, emotional support, legal assistance, access to historical records for individuals and communities seeking to explore their history. And yes, I'll leave it there. Thanks.